a roving little banjo picker up a mellow why you two hold the cotton and the...
Grandpa Jones was a big part of Hee Haw and country music. He was the kind of person who always put smiles on his fans' faces and made them feel welcome. However, behind the jokes and music, there were so many things that people didn't see. His family struggles and career challenges took a toll on him, but many never realized this. Then, after his tragic demise, his family found his journal where his deepest secrets were hidden, and this changed everything. Join us as we unravel the mystery that surrounded Grandpa before and after his demise. Public persona versus private reality. Back then, hearing a banjo and that friendly voice felt like home for a lot of people. The man behind it all had a big smile, wore suspenders, and told jokes that made the whole family laugh. His songs were simple, comforting, and familiar. For many, he wasn't just a performer, they saw him as one of their own. His name was Grandpa Jones. However, what if that name, that image, and that voice were only part of the truth? Grandpa Jones was a staple on the long-running television show Hee Haw, where he spent decades entertaining with down-home humor and fast banjo picking. Long after the lights went off and the applause faded, people started asking questions. A missing journal, a silent family, and now, years after his demise, facts are emerging that reveal the man behind the myth. The truth isn't easy to digest. Born Louis Marshall Jones on the 20th of October, 1913 in Niagara, Kentucky, Grandpa Jones was the son of a farmer and a fiddle player. Louis was surrounded by music right from the start. His father taught him about Appalachian folk songs, and his mother supported his interest in storytelling and singing by encouraging him and sitting to listen whenever he had a story to tell. When the family moved to Akron, Ohio, Louis didn't leave that musical influence behind. He brought it with him, right along with a quiet intensity and a work ethic that eventually helped launch a radio career. In his early 20s, while working as a radio performer in West Virginia, he earned the nickname Grandpa. It wasn't meant to be flattering. A fellow radio announcer teased him for his cranky attitude during early morning shows, calling him Grandpa Jones. The name stuck with him. Instead of shaking it off, Louis leaned into it. He started dressing the part, old-style clothes, exaggerated expressions, and a kind of country wisdom that audiences found endearing. The name became a character, and the character became his career. By the 1940s and 1950s, Grandpa Jones had become a known figure in country music tricycles. He recorded numerous albums, performed at the Grand Ole Opry, and developed a fan base that spanned several generations. However, it wasn't until 1969, when he joined Hee Haw, that his fame exploded. Hee Haw was a musical comedy TV show with rural sketches, silly puns, and musical guests. While critics dismissed it as corny, the public fancied it a lot. The center of it all was the well-known Grandpa Jones. With his banjo slung over his shoulder, Grandpa usually played the perfect role of the very lovable, witty old-timer. The question, "What is for supper?" became the one he was widely known for. Every single week, millions of people tuned in to see what Grandpa would say next. However, despite his popularity, Grandpa Jones rarely gave personal interviews. He almost never talked about his family, his private life, or his struggles. While others cashed in on memoirs and talk shows, he stayed away from the spotlight unless he was performing. Fans took this as humility, but according to those closest to him, it was something deeper and more guarded. When Grandpa passed away in 1998, after suffering a stroke, tributes came from every corner of the country music world. Fellow performers shared stories, television networks aired reruns of his funniest moments, and fans poured into online forums to post messages of love and respect. Beneath the warm public reaction, a quiet storm was brewing. Just a few days after Grandpa's funeral, some of his close family members had reportedly discovered that a handwritten journal that Grandpa Jones kept for many decades was missing. Notice that this wasn't just a notebook of Grandpa's random thoughts. According to people who were familiar with the situation, it was a deeply personal record that was filled with reflections, private concerns, and possibly even confessions. Whispers about the journal quickly made their way through Nashville's close music circles. Some people said that it had been locked in a wooden chest at his Tennessee home. Others claimed one of his children took it without permission. A few even believed it had been destroyed on purpose, just to protect Grandpa's legacy. The family, for the most part, remained silent about it all. They scanned images of handwritten pages that began appearing online in private fan forums and music history blogs. They were not officially attributed to Grandpa Jones, but the handwriting, language, and personal details were convincing. These pages, allegedly from the missing journal, told a much different story than what the one fan had known. In one entry, dated August 1983, Grandpa Jones wrote, "They only love me when I'm singing. When I'm crying, no one hears. I gave the world a version of me I don't even know anymore." Another entry read, "Being Grandpa made me famous. But Louis? I think I left him behind a long time ago." The tone was quite raw and honest, at times even bitter. There were references to arguments with his children, concerns about who would control his estate, and regret over years of emotional distance between him and his family. One section described a fallout with a fellow country artist, someone Grandpa had once considered a brother. The entry ended with a single line, "I forgave him in public, but it was just too difficult to forgive him in private too." Some notes suggested that Grandpa Jones felt trapped by his own public image. He had built a life around a persona that fans adored, but that didn't always match who he really was. That pressure over the years had reportedly affected his relationships with his family at home. Even his marriage, once considered one of the most stable in the country music scene, was beginning to show signs of wear. Grandpa and his wife, Ramona, had performed together for decades. She was by his side through most of his career. The journal entries hinted at disagreements behind closed doors. According to one entry, Grandpa wrote, "She wants to protect the music. I want to protect the truth. Sometimes they don't match." In a podcast interview in 2022, country music historian Neil Calhoun shared a personal memory from his final visit with Grandpa Jones in 1997. The two had met years earlier during a Grand Ole Opry tour and kept in touch. Neil described their last meeting as quiet but deeply intense and productive. "He did not really talk much that day," Neil said. "He just looked at me and said, 'I'm scared that my family will find out who I really am.'" When Neil asked what he meant, Grandpa gave a small laugh and said nothing more. That conversation stayed with Neil for a very long time. When the journal pages surfaced years later, he felt certain that they were real. The voice on the page matched the voice of the man he met in that final moment. The voice was quite worn out, reflective, and no longer hiding behind a smile. On one hand, he was a skilled entertainer who made millions laugh and feel at home. He kept country music alive during a time of massive cultural change. He respected tradition, loved his craft, and brought joy to every stage he walked on. However, on the other hand, he may have lived with emotional walls so high that even those closest to him couldn't get through. The journal shows a man who carried pain, doubt, and regret, much of which he never voiced aloud. Maybe that's the original story. Maybe Grandpa Jones was not a fraud or a hypocrite. Maybe he was just a man who was simply caught between who he was and who the world wanted him to be. The him that the world wanted to see and the him that he wanted to be. Maybe his silence was only a strategy for survival and not even secrecy. He had built a career on being dependable, cheerful, and wholesome. However, he also buried parts of himself to keep that image intact. Tension on the set of Hee Haw. When most people think of Grandpa Jones, they picture him smiling behind a banjo, wearing overalls, and standing in front of a haystack on the set of Hee Haw. For nearly 3 decades, he was one of the show's most recognizable faces. He delivered old-time jokes, plucked banjo strings with precision, and embodied a kind of homespun wisdom that viewers across the country found comforting. However, the truth behind the scenes of Hee Haw was much different, and it included real tension, disagreements, and an emotional burden that Grandpa Jones carried without anyone having to know. Hee Haw first aired in 1969 as a country-themed comedy and variety show, created in response to the popularity of rural-focused television like the Beverly Hillbillies. Designed to blend country music with humor, the show included sketches, corny puns, musical performances, and rustic scenery that became really iconic. While city-based critics often rolled their eyes, rural America embraced the show fully. It became one of the few mainstream programs that represented their culture. Over time, it earned a spot in television history, running in various formats until the year 1993. In public, Grandpa maintained his ever-cheerful character. However, in private, he became increasingly critical of the changes that happened within Hee Haw. In its early years, the show had a strong musical foundation. Acts like Loretta Lynn, Conway Twitty, Roy Clark, and Minnie Pearl all made appearances. But by the 1980s, producers began leaning more into comedy. The music, especially traditional country, took a backseat to sketch humor and visual gags. According to those who worked on the show, Grandpa didn't take well to that shift. A former production assistant, who worked on the set right from 1981 to 1987, described Grandpa as committed but resistant. She said, "He didn't want to be part of a clown show. He thought we were losing what made Hee Haw special, which was real country music and values." She recalled that Grandpa occasionally refused to perform certain skits or lines that he felt didn't align with his beliefs. That wasn't just talk in the mid-1980s. There was a specific skit where Grandpa Jones was asked to mock a rising star in country music, someone who had adopted a more pop-influenced sound. Grandpa was supposed to read a punchline that suggested real country was dying. he flat out refused. Some of his crew members said he walked off the set, telling a producer, "I won't make fun of a man who's trying to make a living singing songs. I've been that man." The segment was rewritten without him, and the moment was never aired. Now, understand that this wasn't even a one-time issue. Over the years, Grandpa reportedly clashed with writers, directors, and even some fellow cast members. While many respected him, some privately described him as difficult or rigid. He believed that Hee Haw had a purpose, which was to celebrate real country culture. As the humor of the show shifted towards slapstick and innuendo, he became increasingly uncomfortable. Grandpa also had very strong religious values. He was a devout Christian and made no secret of the fact that he didn't want to be part of anything he found morally questionable. As new writers joined the show and tried to modernize the humor, Grandpa often pushed back. He objected to jokes involving alcohol, marriage problems, or anything he thought mocked traditional family life. Some say this made it hard to include him in newer segments. Scripts were altered, jokes were removed, and tension rose behind the scenes. Yet, regardless of these disagreements, Grandpa Jones never dared to allow any of it to spill over to the public. On the screen, he was very steady, warm, and highly dependable. His timing remained very sharp, and his performances remained consistent too. Viewers never suspected that he was an unhappy person, not until later years, when his personal writings began to tell a different story. According to leaked pages from what is believed to be Grandpa's private journal, his frustration ran deeper than many assumed. In one entry dated May 1985, he reportedly wrote, "The show doesn't feel the same." There were also quieter moments that hinted at deeper dissatisfaction. Staff noticed that Grandpa began spending less time socializing with the cast. He started leaving the set quickly after filming. During rehearsals, he was polite but less chatty than before. One stage manager recalled that he always used to warm up with banjo runs and humming, but by the early 90s, those warm-ups were gone. Rumors began to spread about the unaired segment from a 1992 taping. The sketch included a joke that touched on family matters, which was possibly echoing real-life issues that Grandpa was facing at home. At the last minute, the segment was pulled. Some believe that Grandpa himself had asked for it to be cut. Others think that producers made the call to avoid upsetting him. Either way, the episode aired without the skit, and no footage of it has surfaced since then. Added to performing, Grandpa had begun recording his own tapes and notes during the last few years of his time on Hee Haw. Some people believe that he was preparing to write a memoir or record the history of the show from his perspective. Those close to him say he kept detailed notes, not just about production schedules or songs, but about moments that bothered him so much. One longtime friend, who wasn't to be named, said that Grandpa talked about wanting to tell the truth someday. He said, "I've kept quiet because I don't want to hurt anyone, but I think maybe people need to hear what really happened." Whether he ever planned to release the notes is unknown. However, after his passing, those materials were never found. A divided family. When Grandpa Jones passed away in 1998, fans across the country mourned the loss of a country music icon. Known for his high-energy banjo playing, sharp wit, and endearing stage presence, he had become a beloved fixture in American homes through his decades-long involvement in the Grand Ole Opry and television's Hee Haw. His passing simply marked the end of an era, but what many did not realize at the time was that it also marked the beginning of an unraveling, the kind that exposed fractures within his family and raised uncomfortable questions about the private life he had guarded so carefully. Grandpa Jones, who was born Louis Marshall Jones, was married to a woman named Ramona Riggins Jones, a respected musician in her own right. Most of the time, they did their performances together and appeared to be deeply connected by both music and by faith. Their partnership spanned decades, and in the public eye, they were considered a wholesome and unified couple. Nonetheless, as more information surfaced over time, it became clear that not everything was as harmonious as it seemed. The couple had 3 children. While the family was mostly kept out of the public eye, those who were familiar with the Jones household later hinted that there had been a growing distance between Grandpa and one of his children in particular. By the early 1990s, the family dynamic had reportedly changed. One of the children was rarely seen at family events or music-related functions, and some neighbors noted that Grandpa Jones became more reclusive as time went on. A neighbor from the Joneses' rural Tennessee community recalled in an interview that Grandpa began skipping family reunions and church gatherings. He would show up for public events, but privately, he began to withdraw more and more as days went by. The people close to him suspected that there were unresolved issues within the family, though no one spoke openly about them. The children remained silent, and Ramona, ever private, gave no interviews addressing the subject. The situation took a turn after Grandpa Jones had passed away on the 19th of February, 1998. He had suffered a stroke 2 days earlier, and although he was rushed to the hospital, he never recovered. Tributes poured in from country musicians, fans, and fellow performers. However, behind the scenes, a much more complicated situation was unfolding. Shortly after the funeral, family members discovered that a personal journal Grandpa Jones had reportedly kept for decades was missing. It was no secret among those close to him that Grandpa had a habit of writing things down. He was known to carry notebooks with him during tours. He occasionally referenced writing down prayers, songs, or ideas. According to one longtime friend, Grandpa had once mentioned that he had been keeping a journal since the early days, using it not only to document his spiritual reflections and music concepts, but also to release private frustrations. The existence of such a journal made sense. What didn't make sense was that it had seemingly vanished. Some in the family claimed that they had never seen the journal. Others reportedly said that the journal had been placed in a small chest in the study of his Tennessee home. That chest, they later said, was empty. There was no note or explanation. It was just a missing piece of Grandpa Jones's personal history. Rumors began to circulate, and some people believed that a family member had taken the journal, possibly to keep it from being released publicly. Others suspected that it had been destroyed out of concern that it contained material that could damage his carefully curated image. With no clear answer, speculation only grew louder. Around the year 2001, not too long after Grandpa's passing away, a very small regional publishing company reportedly reached out to the Jones family with a proposal to write a well-authorized biography. They hoped to include Grandpa's journals if the family was willing to cooperate. At first, discussions went well, then suddenly everything stopped. The publishing house received a formal notice from a law firm representing one of the Jones family members. The letter stated that any personal writings of Grandpa Jones were private property and not to be disclosed. No lawsuit followed, but the project was shelved indefinitely. The biographer, who had been hired later, shared in a podcast that the family seemed divided on what should be made public. This refusal to publish raised more questions. Was the journal being withheld because of deeply personal content? Or did it contain specific details the family felt were best left buried? No one has answered those questions directly. The family has remained quiet, and no public statements have been made about the journal or the leaked pages. A few years later, another attempt to revive the biography was quietly made by a historian from a Tennessee university. He too hit a wall. The family declined to participate, and sources close to them said the wounds within the family had never fully healed. One former colleague of Grandpa's, who had toured with him during the 1950s, opened up in a radio interview saying, "Lewis never let people in. Not really. I think there were things that he carried that nobody, not even Ramona, got to see. That journal, that was probably the only place that he was ever completely honest." The thought is sobering, that a man so loved by the public, so admired by peers, may have lived with an emotional distance even within his own family, that the image of warmth and wholesomeness may have come at the cost of closeness with those who knew him best. Yet, this complexity doesn't erase his legacy, it only makes it more human. Grandpa Jones was not a character made of cardboard, like people often thought. He was a real person, shaped by ambition, pressure, tradition, and regret. He entertained millions and played a vital role in preserving traditional country music. However, he also struggled, like anyone might, to balance personal expectations with public responsibilities. If the journal entries are real, and many experts believe that they are, they show a man grappling with identity. Someone who had built a life around a role, only to realize too late that parts of himself had been lost in the process. Today, Grandpa Jones is still remembered fondly. His music continues to be played, and reruns of Hee Haw still bring laughter to viewers who grew up watching him. For those who dig a little deeper, the story takes on a completely new dimension. Whether the missing journal will ever be released in full remains to be seen. For now, the few pages that have surfaced offer a rare and bittersweet glimpse into the private life of a public figure who made it his mission to bring joy to others, even while carrying his own burdens in silence. A mystery that might never be solved. When Grandpa Jones finally passed away in the year 1998, the world lost one of country music's finest figures. Fans across the nation mourned the man who was known for his humor, his banjo playing, and his endearing persona on Hee Haw. However, what many didn't know was the fact that there were deeper layers to his life, layers that the public never saw until years after his demise. The story of Grandpa's personal struggles, including family tensions and the mystery of a missing journal, has slowly unraveled, raising new questions about the man behind the banjo. Grandpa Jones, born Lewis Marshall Jones, was not only known for his musical genius, but also for his ability to bring joy to those around him. Grandpa's time on Hee Haw made him a fan favorite. His banjo playing and warm personality left a lasting mark. Then, after he passed, people began to see a deeper side of him. Like many celebrities, he struggled to juggle the spotlight and his private life. Not long after the funeral, his family noticed something odd. Grandpa had a journal he had been writing in for years, a place where he poured out his thoughts, emotions, and experiences. It helped him cope with the stress of fame and family life. The sudden disappearance of that special journal raised eyebrows, especially since it was said to hold deeply personal stories. What happened to it, and what did it contain? No one knows. While Grandpa Jones was known for his joyful, comedic persona on Hee Haw, those closest to him knew that he had a more complex side. His marriage to Ramona Riggins Jones, though long-lasting, was not without its difficulties. This showed that even celebrities experience cracks in their marriages and families. As much as late Grandpa Jones's family tried to hide the challenges they faced, they eventually began to show. While they maintained a public image of harmony, behind the scenes, things were not always as perfect as they appeared. By the time of Grandpa's demise, it wasn't said if he reconciled with his family, especially the one child who became estranged. Before Grandpa passed, the family no longer gathered as frequently, and Grandpa's absence from some family events became noticeable. While no one ever publicly discussed the reasons for the estrangement, there were whispers of disagreements over finances and career choices, and some believed that Grandpa's demanding career and public persona had put a strain on his relationship with his family. This, to an extent, might have been true, but it's not confirmed. Some of his close friends believe that Grandpa may have distanced himself from his children because of his growing frustrations with the entertainment industry and the pressure it placed on him. His public image was more important to him, but it came with sacrifices that took a toll on his personal relationships. Grandpa Jones's legacy. Grandpa Jones was more than just a familiar face on television. He was a true icon in country music. His banjo playing, quick wit, and old-time charm won over fans across generations, especially during his time on Hee Haw, where he became a household name. He brought joy and tradition to the screen, helping keep the spirit of classic country music alive. Throughout his life, Grandpa stayed grounded in faith, family, and a love for honest storytelling through music. People connected with him because he felt real, like someone you would meet on the front porch, ready with a song and a laugh. His impact didn't go unnoticed. He earned a place in country music history, not just through his performances, but also through the recognition he received over the years. In 1970, he was nominated for Comedian of the Year at the CMA Awards, showing how much fans and peers appreciated his humor and stage presence. In 1978, he was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, one of the biggest honors in the industry. His autobiography, Everybody's Grandpa, 50 Years Behind the Mic, came out in 1984, giving readers a personal look at his journey. Decades later, in 2023, the American Banjo Museum honored him again by adding him to their Banjo Hall of Fame in the historical category. These awards reflect the lasting impact he had, not just as a performer, but as someone who helped shape the heart and soul of country music. Even now, fans remember the warmth and sincerity he brought to every stage. His legacy lives on in the music, the laughter, and the memories he left behind. In the end, the mystery of Grandpa Jones is more than just about a missing journal or an unresolved family conflict. It's about the complexity of the man who is behind the legend, the man who, despite his fame and success, was never fully understood by the public. That's a story that may never be completely told. What do you think about Grandpa Jones's mystery and the hidden journal? Kindly share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.